So good morning to everybody and welcome to Troopers. I'm happy to see a lot of faces that I've seen last year, so it seemed last year's Troopers lighted some people. My name is Ed Rai. I'm the founder of ERNW, and as such I'm kind of the organizer of the Troopers track, and I will be the chair of today's Troopers track, or at least sometimes of it. And I'm in the fortunate position to give a keynote on some security basics. It's about security mindsets and about simple things that might help to increase the security in organizations and that are often overlooked. The title, Stop the Madness, was chosen, obviously it was chosen deliberately, as I'm working in the security field since '97, and my main role in the meantime is to consult to CSOs or CISOs, as we say in kind of German, on their daily business. And it won't be a surprise if I tell some of you that sometimes working in large organizations and being responsible for security might be kind of tedious work and annoying work. And from my experience, there are certain things that go wrong currently in the security space, and I'm going to cover those. So far, this year hasn't been a very, say, pleasant year for quite some ISOs, for people responsible for security. One of the reasons for this is Configure. I assume everybody here in the room knows what Configure is about. The interesting piece is, once talking about Configure, one has to understand what Configure does and how it worked. In short, Configure is a piece of malware that occurs in different variants. The first variant did kind of classical exploiting of a vulnerability, this one. So it was a kind of self-replicating entity that we usually call a worm. This entity has turned out to be a rather sophisticated piece of code using in later variants stuff like MD6, News, cryptocode. The interesting thing is, in the first variant, it spread by exploiting a vulnerability. In the next variants, it spread, amongst others, by putting itself on USB media. It tried to brute force passwords, and all the stuff that Configure, that really hit hard many organizations, all the stuff that Configure did was quite kind of simple stuff. So it might have been an idea to prevent stuff like Configure with simple recipes and not with, say, overblown, multifunctional, complex technologies. Asking yourselves, how could have Configure stuff, that stuff have been prevented? Facing that question brings up, say, the insight that in most organizations that were hit by Configure, and quite some were hit. So we have large customers that were hit. It depends a bit on the industry sector, especially those customers with large production plants. They were hit hardly by Configure. And all of those have at least one antivirus solution in place, and still it didn't help. The question is, why didn't it help? The answer might be, whatever the answer is, we could ask ourselves, could we have done better? Shouldn't we have known in the year 2009 how to prevent stuff like Configure? And still, it was there, it still is there, it has been widely spread, and maybe we should have known better. We should have had the right approaches or recipes to address this stuff, and I'm convinced we can do better. I'm sure we can do better info security implementation than we have been doing in the past. Point is, how could we do better? Let's have a look at a typical iSource workbench. There might be, most probably there's coffee, there might be some nicotine as well. And the whole bench is covered with stuff, with security control, security instruments, which might be firewalls or IDS, IPS stuff, PKI, all the stuff that clever salespeople try to sell you. Those of you responsible for security might know every some weeks somebody knocks at your door like, oh, we have this solution and buy this and you will be secure. And this is even more in times of economic crisis. It's like they have even more time to put into sales in some organizations. So some of you might know this, this kind of people showing up and trying to sell you this kind of stuff. Besides this kind of stuff, you might have stuff on your desk like policies and firewall rules, stuff that can't be touched in a physical sense, but still implement security, ACLs, permissions. And you might have stuff like processors, patch management, log analysis, monitoring, incident response. All these are pieces that are on your iSource desk, which might help you to some degree implement and achieve security. Now, thinking about the role of an ISO, sitting here, being responsible for implementing security. We might try to sort up these things to get into some order, like this stuff is useful, this stuff is more or less useful. We might try to sort it out. What of all these instruments might be reasonable controls? Before we do that, I'd like to remind you, it's all about the role of an ISO. It's all about risk management. It's not about black or white, do this or don't do this, and you should always use stuff like this or that or this stuff. Your role as an ISO is to implement security with a given set of resources. So you have to steer the set of resources. You have to understand where to put your energy in and which elements to use. And this can be broken down to, it's all about risk. I will repeat this several times during my presentation. Keep this in mind. It's all about putting the right resources at the right place to achieve a reasonable level of security. So whatever you do, it should be, say, risk management based. So back to the iSource workbench. What we have there can be divided into three main categories. There is preventative controls, like think like an immune system. Stuff that helps you that bad stuff doesn't happen at all. There might be detective controls, like a clinical thermometer, like once something happens, we might be able to detect it. And there are reactive controls that come into play once either something bad happened or the circumstances have changed. For example, patch management is per se a reactive control. A patch is applied after a vulnerability gets disclosed. First, there's disclosure of a vulnerability. Second, as a reaction to that, there is applying a patch. So a first approach of sorting out things on the iSource workbench might be there is preventative stuff, there is detective stuff, and there's reactive stuff. And all these pieces might be needed. Again, take in mind it's about risk management. So you have to decide where to put your energy in. So you have to decide about the proportions. How many of your resources are put into preventative or detective or reactive controls? And my statement is here already things go wrong in quite some organizations. My statement is, putting energy and resources into preventative measures usually has the best cost to impact ratio. So one, say, euro spent on preventative controls has more security impact than, say, €1 spent on detective or reactive controls. You might agree, the problem is, why do you, as a whole, I'm addressing quite some ISOs in organizations here, why don't you act accordingly? Looking out in the world and how security is implemented in an organization, it turns out that quite a lot of effort is put into detective and reactive controls, like finding things like IDS, IPS. IPS per se, there is a P like preventative. Thinking about it, it might turn out it is not really preventative. It tries to detect some things and then continue them from moving on, but still it's about detection. So, putting euros, putting resources, putting manpower into preventative stuff might be a good idea. First main message of this talk. Second approach of, say, sorting the things on the ISO's workbench is one that we call in ERW the House of Security. Our, say, stance of overall security is that to achieve overall security, there are usually 3 pillars. The first pillar is components, stuff you buy. Pieces you put there. This might be security pieces like, say, a firewall or an IPS or a backup system. Still, it is every technical components in your environment belongs to this space. So, overall IT and security in overall IT has obviously something to do with, say, components that are deployed. Second pillar in the House of Security is what we call implementation. How you set it up, how the stuff is configured. It's not only about putting pieces there or having pieces there, servers that you are responsible for in terms of security. It's about configuring them in the appropriate way. And the third pillar, some of you might not be surprised to see this, is operations, how you run the stuff. And all these pillars, where the second one can be split into different, say, sub-pillars, that is design. Once you have the pieces, like servers, network devices, firewalls, all the stuff, how to assemble it, put the firewall behind or in front of the server, where to place IPS, IDS, all the stuff. Design might play a role in configuration, which bells and whistles to modify in which way. And all these 3 areas, these 3 pillars, must be reconsidered when talking about security. Your role as an ISO is to achieve security, overall security, based on these 3 pillars with a given set of resources. This is again where risk management comes into play. You have to decide where to put your resources. In times like these resources might look like this. They might be limited in some way. So again, it's about risk management, and it's about understanding that security that comes out of, say, this house depends on 3 areas. And having a second look on this, it turns out we can apply this to the ISO's workbench. And then we have the components, security components in this case. We have implementation details, like policy steering behavior of people, or hopefully steering behavior of people, which doesn't work in many cases. There are quite some people in the meantime who strongly doubt the impact of security policies in different organizations, but this is outside the scope of my presentation. Still, we have the implementation area and we have the operations area, the processes. And it turns out that different organizations put different weight on these 3 pillars. I'm missing a slide here somehow. Okay. I'll stay here for a second. In different organizations, different weight is put on different pieces of this of the workbench. Usually in US organizations with their best of breed approach, they have the mindset of, okay, let's buy the latest, greatest stuff, and once we buy this stuff, once we buy these components, a red appliance and a green one and a yellow one, we will somehow have security. This is how security is done in a lot of, especially US organizations, and they call it the best of breed approach. I'm not sure if this really helps security. I know that some people from the US are here. I know that those people might confirm that this does not always have security. Second, there is organizations who focus mainly on this one. Think of the, say, Linux guys in your organizations, which I call like the itsy bitsy teeny weeny Linux, like, oh, in kernel 2613 we have that flag that could be compiled, and then we have some security. This might be a valid approach. Usually it turns out not to be very operations effective, but from the mindset, there is organizations who focus in this area, and there are organizations that mainly focus on this area, where you have to fill in 5 forms to get access to a system, overblown processors, and in the end you get access to a Unix system after filling out 10 pieces of paperwork, and you get telnet access, as they have not, putting energy into replacing telnet by SSH would be in this area. Still, you have to understand, the house of security is built on 3 pillars, and putting energy in only one pillar will not help to get overall security. Now, we had those 2 approaches of classifying the stuff on the ISO's workbench. I told you there might be preventative, detective, reactive controls, and we have seen the house of security. And we might be able to merge those approaches. As it turns out, in the area of components, of implementation operations, there is preventative components, there's detective components, and reactive ones. Just to give you some examples, say a backup system is per se a reactive control. It doesn't add any value to the overall security as long as nothing goes wrong. Only once something happened, you might react on that stuff that happened, on the incident, by using the system. So it's a reactive control in the component space. The approach of disabling services is a preventive control in the implementation space. And say if you perform log analysis, this is an operational process and it's a detective process. So this classification scheme might help to understand where in your organization the focus on security is on. Try to sort your own workbench, take the pieces and put into this say matrix, and you will see that you will get a very quick idea. Okay, in my organization we focus on components or operations, and we have a mostly detective reactive approach to security or a preventative one. So understanding where you put your energy in will help on your way to overall security. Okay, so now, this is the slide I was looking for. Somehow this the position where I didn't think it would be. We can skip this. In short, to summarize the House of Security approach, from our perspective, from the ERNW security approach, security is about mostly good prevention, it's about visibility, and it's about fast recovery to incidents. And I would like, in the next part of my talk, to put an extra weight on prevention. We put these preacher men into this slide like, okay, let me tell you this. These are the main pieces, and there was one piece From our perspective, well, lots of things go wrong. That's a piece of prevention. So I'll focus on prevention now. Let's have a look how, say, one of the most persistent and common threats in organizational networks, that is the threat of malware. How malware usually works. There are systems, once systems are started, there is processes running on those systems, and now by some magic malware comes arise over the network, infects the process, manipulates the process. Usually this piece of malware tries some so-called privilege escalation, and after that tries to perform malicious actions which might be attacking other systems or say data theft or information disclosure. This is a very simple description of how malware affects the systems. So now let's think about what could we have done once we understand that there is processes running, network packets arriving, and payload that causes harm. What could one have done against, say, this threat? How to prevent those? First step was there's processes running, so it might be obvious. Again, my presentation, my keynote is mainly on very simple things. Simple things that most of you have heard many times in their lives, and still in 2009 I hope to stand here and to tell you those things. First, very basic and obvious approach would be do not start processes, which sounds simple. I mean, think about it, even better, do not install processors or PSAs. I assume